My mom, one day we were coming home from school and we saw smoke coming out of our house. We had a house on a hill in Makakilo. She actually was burning Bible scriptures in there and saying that the end's coming, rapture's coming. And she was on a bipolar fit, burnt the house. CPS came in and said, hey, Mr. Ski, you're going to choose your wife or you're going to choose your kids. And he was like, I'm choosing my kids.
Welcome back to the Front Porch Chronicles. Today's guest is Tyson Suzuki. Tyson and I actually met at the Netflix MVP fights. We instantly vibed, started talking. And I knew that I had to sit down with this dude for a longer conversation. He's originally from Hawaii. He's passionate about biohacking and longevity. He's a father. So today, we're just going to hit record, chase some rabbit holes, see where the conversation goes. And I'm curious, in his word, to get his Hawaiian chocolate mochi
Yeah.
perspective.
Oh, yeah. I'm
Tyson, I
here.
appreciate you taking the time out of your
Thanks
day
for
to come
having
on,
me.
bro.
Thanks for having me, Clinton.
No doubt. We instantly started talking at the fights, and the fights were going on, and we were talking about being a father and all of this other stuff. And it was like, damn, dude, what's
Yeah.
your Instagram? Like, we got to follow each other. So
Yeah.
it's good to get us on here. But for the people that don't know, who is Tyson?
Tyson Suzuki, man, my personal brand, it really just stands for authenticity. And more so than that, just making sure, like, as of late, my new epiphany is, being a cool dad. It's really important because, you think fatherhood and you think like, well, following in my father's steps, and it gets a okey doke per se for certain people. But for me, there's a way to still be, there's still a way to still be youthful. There's still a way to be, hungry and ambitious. It just doesn't stop there. It just doesn't stop with fatherhood and whatnot. And you know, it's just important that we all hold each other accountable as men. Really, really ground ourselves, but more so than that, but like be able to build off communities of men who are willing to, say, hey man, I'm going through it. How do I get through this? Whether it's through fatherhood or whether it's through marriage or whether it's through like personal development. It is up to us to really each one teach one. It's super important to me. More so than that, just have a sense of advocacy. That's another part of my brand is being willing to speak up and say something, especially in moments where people don't want to say nothing. People are okay with being mutable. And I think it's important because all of us have our walks of life, but there's an opinion that's formed out of it. And it's okay to speak that. We are in America. This is a place where we have freedom of speech for now, right? And what's left of it. But for the most part, we have to be able to be vigilant about that. We have to be having this sort of advocacy talk. And we do have to pay attention to what's happening and who's writing the narrative, So
I think you hit the nail on the head, and that was one of the original conversations we talked about was fatherhood. So I'm curious, what really made you shift into that mindset, or how was it with you growing up, your relationship with your father that made you want to do things differently?
from a personal background, and this is literally me being completely like authentic with you in this case scenario. And a lot of people don't really know my story. My father, I come from a single father. My mom and my father met in Hawaii, dancing at the wave disco, doing their thing and whatnot. And it's like Mr. Miyagi meeting the dancing queen, right? And they had us. And I later discovered that they got a divorce while we were still a family and never told us. And that to me, every family has its secrets, right? And for me, that kind of, I found that out after my father passed away and whatnot. But my mom, she was definitely a Rolling Stone. I'll be honest. She had her issues mentally. She was bipolar and whatnot. So I think the sort of real crossroads that happened in my family was, my dad was grinding and he had started a food truck, which turned into a place at the raceway stand, Hawaii Raceway Park, which is no longer there. And he blew that up and started making a catering company. And while he's working his ass off, my mom she didn't really have much going on. So she was still kind of like low key partying and just like, she was kind of just losing her focus as a mother. I one day we were coming home from school and we saw smoke coming out of our house. We had a house on a hill in Makakilo. I grew up on Oahu, by the way. I grew up on Oahu, Hawaii. And she actually was burning Bible scriptures in there and saying that the end's coming, rapture's coming. And she was on a bipolar fit, burnt the house. And that was the crossroads. CPS came in and said, hey, Mr. Suzuki, you're going to choose your wife or you're going to choose your kids, but you only can choose one. My dad was very vigilant of being a father at that. And he was like, I'm choosing my kids. And, I grew up with a single father, I grew up with a single father, and for me, it was really tough because when my mom left, my father's health started to deteriorate around, I would say, sixth grade year. My dad, his kidneys just went shot. And, he had to go to surgery to get the shunts installed in him for dialysis, basically the tubes
Yeah.
and everything. And he got a blood infection and he was in the hospital. Now, he was in the hospital for, I'd say, roughly about close to a little over half a year. Mind you, brother and my sister and I, we were living at the house by ourselves, and school got a hold of that. We were anticipating my dad would get out within a week. We didn't get out in a week. We'd visit him and whatnot, but we didn't tell anybody. And, my father was very like, he was very adamant about being, I'm coming home. I'm going to come home. I'm going to come home. And, of course, he didn't make it to the PTA meetings. And, they sent a police over on a wellness check a little before Christmas, and they found us living alone. And they were like, we got to put you in, we got to put you. And that was tough. That was really tough. At that point, my family started to hit a crossroads again. And it was really tough growing up in Hawaii. As much as people say it's like, oh, you're in paradise. Paradise can be lost when it comes to certain things. And the irony of it all is that, my dad's family, they didn't like my mom. There was a crossroads with that. In essence, just isolated themselves from our family. And a lot of things could have been prevented had they just checked in on us, right? And they didn't at the time. And I literally, I look at it and I blame the elders for it because, they're very, very prideful and stubborn. One
Set
thing
in their
about
ways.
set in their ways, and with Japanese people, it's like they're very like compartmentalized when it comes to emotions, trauma, and all sorts of stuff. So they all hold it in and whatnot and whatnot. So that was a very difficult thing. And knowing that I had a huge family and they weren't there when we really needed them. And we've made amends. My family like, we have a great relationship. I have a better relationship with the younger generation because they didn't know what was going on. People my age and, a little older, but not the older generation with my father guys, because they were totally, neglectful to the fact of not paying attention to their other side of the family. And that's a whole can of worms I could go later down the road with how that family was disjointed at the time. But so now, we get put in a foster home, and they keep my brother and I, and my sister, she gets adopted, right? And she ends up with a military family and moving off the island, and it's just me and my brother in this foster home now, right? The coolest part about it, and I'll always be grateful for this, is I ended up on a ranch with John Teixeira. He's a Paniolo in Hawaii. That means cowboy.
Yeah.
And he was a rough and tumble, like real man's man, a cowboy. And the irony of it all is that we ended up on the east side of Oahu in Waimanalo, where my early roots were. My dad had a banana farm out there in Waimanalo. And I remember as a kid being on that side. But at the time, prior to that, we were living in Honolulu. So we ended up in Waimanalo, and we're on this ranch. And, my summers were spent freaking feeding horses alfalfa hay and cleaning up stables to get some bread, you know, cleaning up stables to get some bread. I started to learn how to ride quarter horses and whatnot. And, it was a big transition for me. All my friends were in town, and I'm over here in Waimanalo, just like, damn, my dad's sick. Now CPS is saying, you got to go through classes. You got to get better. And he got out of the hospital, I'd say a year after that, but still he was in and out, but he was stable, a year after that. And we were going back and forth and visiting my dad and whatnot. At that time, I would go during the weekends to visit my dad and check and hang out with him. And then I'd hang out with my friends. And we were literally like, we were selling pot to tourists in Waikiki. And I can tell you the stories of us walking the strip. And at the time, Waikiki was such a hustle and bustle and whatnot. Bruno Mars, it's a funny story. But Bruno Mars and we were the kids with the afros in Waikiki. And he would be performing and coming out of the outrigger doing the Legends show and all that stuff and whatnot. I remember him very well. His friend dated my sister. My close friend dated his sister as well. But that's a whole nother
Wow.
conversation. But here I am on the weekends, like making bread, selling weed to tourists. I sold weed to Method Man. That was really cool. I sold him a dub, made a little extra off of that. I sold Willie Nelson weed, which was really cool. You know who Willie Nelson was, but at the
At
time
the time,
that was
what
really
was
cool.
going through your mind during this time, as far as, because you've got a lot of stuff that
Mhm.
you've been through already at such a young age. What was going through your mind while you were in foster care?
What was going through my mind was, where was my mom? Like, mom, like anybody, like, are you guys around? Is anyone being present? Like, this has got to be just a temporary thing. And I stayed in that foster home for 4 years. And by the grace of God and just by the grace of the universe, I was very fortunate to be able to be in a place that was supportive, nurturing, and really, really, like, it was really um a man's place. John Teixeira raised us with his mom, and we had at least at some points 10 kids in the house. And a lot of the times, I would think to myself, am I gonna get to go home? And at some point I got comfortable and I was like, maybe it's not meant to be, and maybe I'm here. Maybe I'm gonna keep that trajectory of, you know, Paniolo cowboy lifestyle. Things that were going through my head. Where's my sister? How is she? And we didn't have any contact with the family. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. We were very fortunate that John Teixeira took me and my brother, because a lot of foster homes won't take siblings, believe it or not. I want to take siblings because it's easier to keep them isolated and instill what you want with youth. So that was a little fortunate of us. Uh, um, things that were very difficult, that I would often think about is, like, why me? The why me questions. Why me? Like, I don't think our family deserved that. And but then again, it just was the circumstance we were dealt with. Health is a super important part of it. So I was going through it, and I really felt like, why me? Like, what did we do to deserve this?
I think
That was
deeper, it
tough.
was probably with your mom, that
Correct.
situation. Do you feel like, did she ever come back around or try to make amends, or what was
No,
that?
no. I later found out after her passing as well. She went to Seattle and she actually had another child, which is my long lost sister. And we found out she had another child, and allegedly there may be another one. And my mom, I just don't think was in her right mind. I found peace and solace now with her, because I understand that she just wasn't there. If she wasn't there, and we have this word in Hawaii, kuleana, as in do your part. It's a native Hawaiian word that everyone should do their part, or kokua, pitch in. You know, kuleana, responsibility. Kokua, pitch in, to do something. And I just was hoping that she would have these sort of moments, or maybe wonder, hey, where are my kids? And it was really tough. It was really tough. My mom, she was from Cleveland originally, and she came from a huge family, and a side of me even questioned their side. Like, did you guys ever ask? And I'm fine with the family now, because lived their own life. They did what they did, and I realized generationally, families just didn't really, look out for one another. They were very like, I'm gonna work on my side of town, you work on yours and whatnot. We'll catch up when we can and whatnot. And a lot of standoff or neutrality on things that could have been prevented because of a generational sort of thing where people just weren't involved. It's just, family secrets are supposed to be family secrets.
And family's
I
supposed to protect family. One of the most toxic things that we're taught, family's supposed to protect family, when most of the time the people that hurt us worse are family.
correct, correct.
So, with all of that going on, leading back to the fatherhood, is that what really made it so important to you to be the man and the father that you are, to help break that generational curse?
100%. I'm a solid dad, and I'm light years beyond where he was, and I know that's where he would want me to be. I am even a better father than my dad. And for me, that was imperative. Like, once I've got my mini me's, as a father, this is not a rehearsal. It's showtime. This is not a rehearsal. This is showtime. And I am front and center. I am present and I am there. I'm fortunate, very fortunate, because
This
I
is something that
realized these things, and I didn't want to follow my mom's footsteps.
I know now. The more that we're having this conversation, the more I see why we vibe the way we do. I grew up very similar, with chaos, a little bit different. My dad was not a good person.
Mhm.
And so, on the flip side of that, it made me very in tune with being a parent. And it made me want to heal my toxicity and traumas that I had dealt with, because I didn't want my kids to have to bear my stuff, right? In the same
Yeah.
way, like how you talked about, you had to bear your mom's stuff. And so that's why it made it so important for me to be a good dad, to be present. And a lot of people have this thing in their mind that being present is, and this is something you posted the other day, a moment with your daughter.
Mhm.
And it really resonated with me, because a lot of people feel like being a present parent means that they're signing them up for softball, or they're doing this, or they're paying for this vacation. But at the end of the day, that's not what kids, I mean, I'm sure they probably like going to trips and whatever, but at the end of the day, what we need is that core thing of like what you probably thought to yourself a million times. I just want to be loved. I just want to feel like that I'm safe, right? And so, watching you with your daughter on that skateboard and hearing your conversation, and knowing, and you talking about her being safe, it really resonated. And I felt that I knew, without knowing your story, that you were somebody who wanted to be and do different. And that in this world is a rare thing. And it got my respect for sure.
I appreciate that. I have a question for you. What point did you realize your father wasn't the person you wanted to be? 'Cause watching your superhero crumble, right?
It happened for me. It took twofold, right? I went through my second divorce and I was in my 40s, 42, 41, 42. And I had to look at myself and be like, hey, something's not right with you. And so when I did that, because when you grow up in a household of chaos and you grow up with manipulation and you grow up with mind fucks, you're delusional to what the reality is and what is real and what is not, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I never really, I knew my dad did things to me, but in my mind, it was like to do the things that he needed, or that he wanted, or that he whatever. So wasn't really until I looked at my own self and was like, hey, you're toxic. I had to look in the mirror and say, hey,
That's an
you
epiphany. That's a big
Yeah,
epiphany.
bro. And I still remember I looked in the mirror and I could see my face, but it wasn't me. Like, just it felt like God had finally put his hand on my shoulder and was like, hey, you need some work. And it was like I
Yeah.
had been through all of these things, all of this stuff growing up, but it had formed me into this person that was delusional. And I thought that it was normal. And so once I started healing myself, was I able to look at how my father treated me and how that delusionally pushed into what I thought a man was supposed to be, what I thought a father was supposed to be, what I thought a husband or boyfriend was supposed to be. And so when I did that, and I realized myself first, because first we have to work on us, because if us isn't healed, we can't try to heal other relationships. And so I went to my dad and I said, hey, you did some things. My dad, and I've forgiven him, but my dad would beat me. I remember, and it wasn't like anything that I per se did. It was like if he had a bad day, it was going to be my fault. It was going to be him taking that out on me. And so I still remember he would take this certain breath, and I knew that it was just going to be chaos. And so I came to him and I said, hey, you did some things to me. I'm willing to forgive you, but we're going to have some talks that are going to be uncomfortable. My dad, complete narcissist. And again, I don't use that in this, everybody now is like, everybody's a narcissist. No, I don't think
Yeah.
that. I think a lot
So
of
it's
people.
freely thrown around. Yeah.
Yeah, but my dad legit was, and when I tell you what he was like, if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be the man that you were. You wouldn't have won championships. You wouldn't have done anything with your life, yada, yada, yada. And I got off the phone and I cried like a baby. And had just kind of started doing therapy before, and I come to the realization of I had been sexually assaulted, just all of this stuff. And so all
Yep.
of this stuff was going on at once. And we all basically fundamentally have this wound of we wanted to be loved and we wanted to give love freely and without anything in return. And so we want that from our parents, especially. And so it makes us jaded in a lot of ways because we'll forgive shitty stuff because we want that. And it was about a month later, I came back to my dad and called him, and I'll never forget. And by this time, I had started to learn a little bit of self love, and I said, hey, I wanted to call you. I wanted to really make amends. I wanted to give you time. And I don't know what in my mind made me think that he was going to change his mind or that he was going to see the light, but I wanted to believe that he would. And he just basically reiterated and said, hey, I said what I said, wouldn't change it. And you need to quit telling people you got sexually assaulted because it makes you look weak. And it was like something clicked in me, bro. And it was like, you know what? You don't deserve this. You don't deserve this. And as much as you want him to love you, as much as you think that you'll eventually get him to love you, he just will not. And so I had to, on a whim, make a quick decision. My sanity and break that generational curse for my kids, or hold on to the hope and prayer still that my dad would change. And I chose my kids. And very similar to
Big
what you
decision.
said, your dad. Yeah. And it was hard at first because, again, we want to be loved and we want to give love to our parents. And I remember I told my dad, I said, when you die, your legacy will die with you. My kids will never know you. And that's because you made this choice to not change. And so I said, I love you, but I've got to let you go. And I got off the phone and he called back several times over the next couple of years. But I knew in my heart, I knew in my soul that he wasn't gonna change. And so I had to let go of it. And that was what really made me say enough is enough was.
Wow. Wow. And going back to what I was saying, it's just like these older generations, like they have this sort of chip on their shoulder, right? Per se. You gotta be tougher than that. You can't signs of weakness, and it's difficult for men. A lot of men will just bottle things up because and finding therapy for that isn't easy just to even take the step to do it.
Yeah. Finding a tribe and finding people that are open enough to say, I need help is
Correct.
difficult thing. And the reason is, and the reason that I found that most people don't choose to heal is it's hard to look in the mirror and say, I'm fucked up because the world, and this is where I'm just going to be honest with me, I've had every reason to be a horrible person. I've endured and been through so much chaos, hurt, pain, everything imaginable. And I've made a lot of bad decisions, but I had to look in the mirror and I had to say, hey, those things happen, but I can't be a shitty person and let those things that happen define me. So I had to look in the mirror and I had to say, you're fucked up, Clinton. And like that was where, for me, I find peace and solace in knowing that it's kind of like AA. Like until you
Yeah.
can say, hey, I'm such and such and I'm fucked up, I don't think you
Right.
can truly help or yourself or heal yourself because you have to first look internally.
Internally. That's a big that's a hard pill to swallow, big one at that, to do that. And I hope that a generation of men realize that, we have to take those steps to find the answers we need to develop as men that we do, to be present in the lives of our children, to be, whole, to be whole, you know, in front of our children.
I think these conversations that we're having and being able to be vulnerable, being able to be an alpha when you need to be an alpha, but also having a divine feminine energy in the sense of being able to have nurturing energy and all of that stuff. I think these conversations that we're having, these things are the change. I think us hosting stuff with our kids and not having to worry about looking like a simp or looking like, hey, we're weak or that, hey, we're inferior or hey, that we're whatever. I think this is the change. I think we are the face of what is going to be the change to this world in this universe. What you're doing with your daughter and your children is the change because it's
Yep.
each one teach one. And as we teach our kids, and I'm very open and honest and transparent with my kids, my younger kids, not so much. My older kids, they're old enough that they can handle it. They know my story, they know what I've done, they know what I've been, they know everything in that aspect because I wanted to share with them because it's such a thin line between life and death. It's
Yep.
such a thin line from one choice and you're in prison the rest of your life. And a lot of people don't look at it like that, but you really should because you don't want to live in this mindset of being so paranoid with everything, but you also don't want to put yourself in certain situations or risk to
Yep.
go down pathways you don't need.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that within itself, that fosters, growth out of people to want to be okay with speaking about it, okay with talking about, their hardships, and not just talking about the icing on the cake, right? Talking about the process to make the cake. Hands
Everybody
dirty,
wants to talk about the icing. Everybody wants the
Yep.
icing. They want to talk about the icing, but they don't want to talk about the sweat equity that it took to get there. And it's not beautiful. It's not, there's times that it's ugly. There's times that you have to go through things that are uncomfortable. But in order for you to find whole peace, you have to go through the storm.
Yep.
Just is what it
We really
is.
do.
I know
We really do.
we talked about biohacking and longevity and wanting to get into that. I know one of the things that really helped me was psychedelics. You know, I had a traumatic brain injury on top of all of the PTSD that I had. A year or so ago, I had early onset dementia, and Alzheimer's, and started using one of the products was nootropics. Shout out nootropics
Shout
and
out to
microdose
Nootropics.
and microdosing really helped me heal my brain and come back. So what things have you used or biohacks do you have that can kind of help some of the people?
Going back to the foster home, one of the things I used to do was I used to sell mushrooms as well. So we would go, when I would clean stables, there's this place called Town and Country, and it's this ranch where they have all the big rodeos and stuff. But there's this mound where you would take all the cow manure, and it would just be in this thing. We called it Cow Pie Island. Cow Pie Island. After a rainy season, we'd go there with brown paper bags and start picking these mushrooms and throwing it in there and whatnot. And we'd hit a heavy trip. This is when I was at this point I was in high school, still in the foster home, and we would sell those bags. We'd sell those bags, and mushrooms definitely helped. The psychedelics has more so than just help. It's brought me a sort of like inner peace and self awareness. And I live by the four agreements. I always make sure that that's something that you have to realize, do your best. You have to realize you can't take things personal, like things such as that within the foundations of that book. But in terms of psychedelics, I really think mushrooms have helped a lot. I've found myself having a sort of existential crisis on it and realized, whoa, I need to change my ways. I have been on ayahuasca. I have done an ayahuasca 3 days back to back journey of it. My I had found, long story short about it, I had found two stuntmen while I was watching a sort of lunar, once in a lifetime chance, watching this blood red moon
Yeah.
on a mountain. And I found these two people, and they were like, "We're light workers. We do ayahuasca." I had no idea. And they're like, "You should come." And we were chatting it up and whatnot. And they invited me to one of their ceremonies, and they sent me this long email. And the long email basically said, just come with intention and ask your questions and bring your messages that you want. I just want to know, are my parents okay? And one of my number one things was, I want to let you know I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. That was the message I wanted to bring to them. And, I did the ceremony. I got to go to their caustic records. Crazy. I believe met, I met the higher being while on ayahuasca. And during that time, I was actually the 5-year-old version of myself, but naked, with this guide, this spirit guide, going through their caustic record, going through and unraveling my life and seeing the volumes of information in this giant, what seemed to be a pearl opulence Coliseum records as I was walking through. Ayahuasca has definitely helped a lot in my journey, in my walk of life and whatnot. It really, really has. It's been about, wow, when was that? That was about, it's got to be close to a decade since I've done it, and it has stuck with me. It has with me since. The message, the journey, 3 days felt like like one day felt like a lifetime. 3 days felt like an eternity. I hit the vacuum of space as a beacon of energy, light, traveling while on it. And I feel that psychedelics has brought in a heightened sense of awareness. Psychedelics has brought in peace. Psychedelics have brought in, growth within myself to, look myself in the mirror and reflect and say, these are who I am. And are these the tools that are serving me? Are these the tools that are allowing me to grow? And if not, am I willing to let it go? Question that, and wasn't easy.
That's the hardest thing
It
is to
wasn't
let
easy.
go. Yeah. That's the
Yeah.
hardest thing is to let
Plant
go.
medicine is the utmost important, when it comes to wanting to I look at it this way. I had a drone view, or I had a one-on-one view, right? I had just this regular view of my life. And once I got on psychedelics, I had a drone view looking above, God sight of
Yeah.
my life. And that is priceless. And that's what psychedelics does, and it's never easy. It's never easy, to take that sort of step. When I first heard what ayahuasca was, I was like, what's this? Like, something you smoke or whatever. I was like, I had no idea what it was. And I was like, wow, you're drinking it and you're gonna feel it in your system and you're gonna you're gonna have a DMT experience. You're gonna have a real DMT experience that's gonna either illuminate you or darken you. It's just how you come with your intention. Are you there?
Yeah, it booted me out. First took ayahuasca, what?
What I was saying is that it'll either illuminate you or darken you, but it's just how you came with that intention when you approached that ceremony. In my ceremony, I saw a man scream 1,000 voices and die 1,000 deaths, and you could just hear him screaming. And I thought I heard thousands of people coming out of this man's mouth was he as he was going through it, whatever he was facing. He was screaming bloody murder, and it was scary, you know. And the shaman had started singing and started walking around the room singing, and it was almost this angelic voice that had soothed him and soothed all of us. That took away, you know, that sort of overlap of experience that was happening to him, but also we were experiencing because we were by proxy right next to him, you know. You know, that spiritual essence was just another proof that, you know, you're reaching a higher form when on psychedelics, you know, a higher self, a higher consciousness, you know.
For
So
me, I got my breakthrough when I fully submitted to the experience. I think coming in, when you go through so much trauma, you really don't believe in anything that takes away control or what you think in your mind. Hey, I'm not going to be in control. You fear because it's like when you're growing up, like if you weren't in control, then you were getting beaten or abused or whatever. But once I fully submitted to ayahuasca, and I was like, okay, look, whatever you need to tell me, was when I had the epiphany and the breakthrough and kind of talking to all of the dead people throughout my life. And it was a very, you know, when people talk about psychedelics, they have this perception like it's like these things and you're like, oh, I'm falling and it's scary and it's whatever. And some people might have scary experiences. For me, it was very calming, it was very relaxing, it was very insightful. And that could be because of the place that I went, La Guaira in Medellin, Colombia. It could have been with the group that I was with. I was with Athletes Journey Home, which is the nonprofit I work with. I don't know what
Ian
it was,
McCall, Ian McCall, great
who or
guy.
whatever it was that it was divine timing. And it allowed me to go in and heal portions and parts of myself that I was unable to see. And it fully allowed me to see the world through a clear lens as opposed to jaded by all of the trauma and all of the stuff that had happened to me. So
You know, they say Mother Ayahuasca finds you when the time is right. They say she
100
finds you when the time is right, and it seems like that was the case with both of us.
It was definite divine timing. I know for me, it helped me as a person and an individual, but one of the biggest things for me was as a father. It really shifted my
A
mindset as
hundred
a
percent.
father because again, I was jaded to what my dad had taught me was you're supposed to be in control and you're supposed to tell you kids are supposed to not speak unless spoken to, or you know, if they don't listen to you, you need to spank them. And you know, I'm not saying, again, people, whatever you do with your kids is up to you. As long as you're not abusing them, then I have to put hands on you. But if you want to spank your kids, you can spank. I know for me, after going, it allowed me to, as you say, redefine the
Mhm.
cool dad era. It allowed me to kind of be cool, but from a standpoint of I was respectful fully of the autonomy of my kids instead of feeling like that I had to push what my values were or what my things were onto them. Yeah. So,
As father, I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, and
yeah.
they're 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 not my property. I think the approach back then was like, you are mine, you're
Yeah.
my property. Psychedelics has helped me realize that, these are sentient main beings of of great proportions from the light years here to carry on, your sort of moral fiber, your ethics, your growth within yourself, and be able to be better than what you are. For people with ego, I don't think they want to hear that. I don't think they want to hear that sort of, I'm here to be better than my parents. That within itself is so beautiful. That catharsis of being able to take what you have and be even better. And I know my father's grateful, and I know my mother's rejoiceful that I am better, way better than both of them,
Yeah.
and to me, that is the utmost importance of fatherhood. You have to figure out how to take it a step further, even better. How do you be better than what you have and
Yeah.
know that, like, you are in equipping them in this world to be able to challenge, what they were taught, and in a sense innovate the approach that was presented to them.
And let them be them. I see so many people, it drives me insane. I'm gonna rant for a second. It drives me insane when I see people projecting their shit onto their kids. And like when I go to jujitsu competitions or I go to baseball games or football games or whatever, and it's like these parents are projecting their shit onto these kids, and they're almost trying to live their life through these kids, and they're getting mad at these kids because they can't live up to this pedestal that these people want them to be on. And it's like, bro, just let the same way you want to just be, let your kids just be. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said people think of it as property. And I think that was the biggest delusion that I grew up with, was that I was the property of. And so therefore I had to show the loyalty to, and I had to do all of these things for. And at the end of the day, our parents are no different than any other people that are in our lives. And if it's toxic, it is okay to cut that line or cut that string. In the vice versa, like you said, it's our responsibility to our kids to help them navigate what life is and is not, and not again project our shit onto them, and be
At
present.
all.
A lot of people again aren't present. Like they give these kids, these iPads and these phones and all of this stuff, and then they complain about all you do is stay on the phone and all you do is stay on the iPad. Well, how did they get it? Why aren't you limiting their that to them? You can't give them stuff and equip them with shitty stuff and then turn around and be mad. That's like these parents that are like, have these 16, 17-year-old kids, 15, and they're killing people or they're robbing people and they're doing all this stuff. And the parents like, well, I don't know where this came from. Dude, people don't just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to go be a fucking thug. Like there was something over the years that got them to that. Why weren't you as a parent paying attention to?
Yeah. And even deeper is why weren't you taking the steps to prevent what you had experienced to stop with you instead of transition into them, right?
Yep,
You don't want that to transition to them, do you? And if so, then that's just lack of an evolving monkey to
yep.
not even be aware. The lack of that becomes just a dumb monkey that just doesn't want to know the growth that could happen, that doesn't want to see the growth, or you hit a limiting ceiling to where you think that that's okay. And those failing beliefs will always surface in the behavior, always surface in the behavior of the child, and it's just awareness. And if people, I wonder, and I would hope that they ask themselves, am I who I'm supposed to be? Am I along the purpose of growth that I started from,
Yeah.
And what did I acquire? What bad habits, what behavior did I acquire along the way that isn't serving me? What isn't serving me? You know, and that within itself is a very, like I said, hard pill to swallow. It's a big pill to swallow to really look yourself in the mirror and ask that question. And I don't know if a vast majority of people even ask that.
I don't think they do. I think the problem is so many people are just going through life and they're going through the motions and they're going through what they have been taught was the best. And that's where it comes down to, do you make the decision to be a free thinker? And I think that's where psychedelics helps, is it allows you to be a free thinker and you not think
Hmm.
from that slave mindset of I'm just supposed to do what I'm told and I'm just shopping. I think that's the in lies the problem, is so many people are just going through the motions of what they call a husband, a wife, a father, a mother. Like, people are just going through the motions. And then rather than taking responsibility, what they do is they deflect and then they make it about what the world has done to them and why they are. And again, I'm not saying, like, if you've been through some shit, that it's not okay to have grace and mercy with yourself. I'm not saying that at all, because Lord, I could take you to church on a Monday. But what I'm saying is, you can't let that define who you are and taint your bloodline with that stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know,
I mean, how are you?
speaking about marriage, I know you're supposed to get married later this year. I want to ask you a question that kind of popped
Yeah.
into my head. I know you went through the situation with your mother, and all of that. How did that define your relationships leading up to finding who is going to be your wife?
You know, I grew up amongst men. Like, I grew up amongst men, hard men, strong men, and even faulted men, right?
Yeah,
It wasn't until the death of my parents that I realized that I was missing the femininity, being the sort of, soft power of understanding that I have to be in tune with my emotions. I have to be aware of my emotions. And in my relationships, I would always find a sort of matriarch to date. She had to be a strong woman, stronger than my mom. And for those that weren't, I would easily disregard or, just be on my fuckboy with them
yeah,
without any sort of like care as to how they were, and if I was just using them, for sex. And that's difficult, like that within itself. Like, I wouldn't have as much as a respect for women that weren't strong. All women have a strong capability. They can bear children. They have a menstrual cycle. We don't. And our contribution to life is just a fucking commercial compared to the movies they have to go through, you know, with bearing life. And that's innate. And I feel that I often took for granted, some of the relationships, and I would have a strong sense of abandonment issues with women. I felt that this is great, but I don't know how long this is going to last. I would oftentimes just be very, like, as I would say, a little colder. And it wasn't until I sat with myself that I realized that it's not them, it's me. It's all me. Like, I am the culprit here. I am the problem. And that wasn't easy to come to, because in the end, I realized that that was me perpetuating my relationship with my lack thereof relationship with my mom. A lot of people have daddy issues. No, I had mommy issues, and that wasn't easy to know that, I bared that weight on me for so long.
yeah,
And, with Brooke, my fiance, she has more than enough challenged me to be aware of myself and my relationship that had failed with my mom. And that sort of challenge within itself proved to me that if she's willing to do that, no one else did that. No one else did that for me. And that had really resonated with me because I was on that trajectory already. But that has like really, really like proved that wow, I'm dealing with a real matriarch who's light years beyond her contempt with her matriarchy. She is a real strong woman, and she is truly someone that I know has my vested best interest as a man. And that was a beautiful realization to know that. Because I'm not perfect. I'm not. I'm not perfect, and I have fleshly desires, and I fight them, and she knows that, and I'm very lucky to be able to understand that, like, I've got someone here who's here not just for the previews, but for the whole movie. Yeah.
That's dope. You know, it was similar to me. I had to go through looking at kind of me versus me. And it was like, I kept looking at it. And I'm like, dude, why do I keep getting these horrible relationships? Why is it? And then it was like, finally, I had to look internally and I had to be like, well,
Yeah.
until you heal, you can't have a healthy relationship. And for me, I didn't realize it until later, kind of similar. I looked for women that resembled my mom, and which wasn't necessarily a good thing because my mom was a very loving, caring, giving woman, but it always came at the cost of manipulation. And you had to be on her same thought process. Or you had to be, and if you weren't, it would switch and it would be love and giving of love to instantly like, "Oh, but remember when you did this, you were a horrible son," or remember when you did this. And so I didn't realize it until later. And I was like, dude, I kept looking for broken bird women because I was a broken bird. And it was like
Yeah.
once I healed myself, now the it comes to where I'm trying to find a woman that is equally yoked. And so it's very difficult in these days and times of dating because, especially when you're a healed man, because you are in tune with your emotions, your things. And I recently got back with my youngest kid's mother, and things were great initially, but then it was like one of those things that we were hitting these roadblocks where I was talking about feelings and emotions, and she couldn't really resonate or know what to do with those things. And so I had a friend of mine, and this is why it's so good to have a good tribe. And he's like, dude, she was in love with the toxic version of you. So what makes you think that she's going to understand this new healed version of you? And I was like, shit. And so it's
Mhm.
like, it's very difficult to find someone who, like you said, is there for the previews, but they're going to also be there for the whole movie and understand we're all and and don't get me wrong, I don't need a perfect woman. I don't need a woman that hadn't been through some shit because I've been through some shit. All I am looking for is someone that's been through some shit that's not letting that define them and is waking up each day and wanting to be and do better. And so
Yep.
and you think that's easy, but it's not easy thing in
But
this
yeah.
days and
No.
time because it's like people don't want to admit that they are part of the problem. They want to blame it on their past partner or blame it on their upbringing or blame it on all of these other
Yep.
things. And yeah, those things filter, but they don't define. And so it's up to you to make that choice to change or not change and then take it from there. So kudos to you and can't wait to
Yeah.
see you get married. That's
Yeah.
super dope.
It's happening. Yep.
I know, right? It's
Retiring,
coming.
retiring to Jersey
It's coming up quick
now.
too. Quick passing in a hurry.
Coming up quick. coming up quick. And, and I won't like it conversely, like in the direct opposite. I dated strong women and I was
Yeah.
really lucky to have that sort of foresight, but I was always under the sort of pretense and notion that this isn't going to last for long. My abandonment issues would just speak
Yeah.
volumes
That's
to
what,
me. And I was like, they're
yeah.
just going to leave anyway. Like they're not here for the long haul. They're not here for that. They're saying that it's no, it's just too good to be true. I
Yeah.
just it's great for now. And she says this, but she doesn't get it. She doesn't understand. And I really, really am grateful that I even had a chance with the women that I've dated in my life. And I am really grateful that, I've learned a lot from them, from my high school years up into now 42, as I'm like, wow, I am even better because of that. And
Yeah.
I just wish I wasn't so broken at the time, but I know that was a part of my journey that had to happen for me to be where I'm at.
Yeah, you
And
got to
that
go
that
through the storm. You got to go through the storm, and for you to fully be grateful for the things that you do have, because a lot of times people aren't grateful for those things, and they take those things, like you said, they take those things for granted, right? And they take those things and don't honor those things because of their past, or feeling like, oh, I'm
right.
too broken, or hey, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
kudos to you for having that wherewithal to be grateful and to honor that, and to take that in and use that as you evolve, because it's hard when you have abandonment issues and you have these issues to finally let them go and submit. And that's a strong thing to do. So, like I said, kudos to you
Man,
for
it it
doing that.
it it, it took time, and it's still a process. The subconscious mind does not sleep, and you have to be aware of what's happening subconsciously to yourself along the lines of that. And I I really, really see that, like, all right, my heightened sense of awareness now is much better then. And I look at it as like for this to happen, it was all sacrifice of that. And, you know, I look at my previous girlfriends before, and they're fucking great.
Yeah,
I'm like, they're fucking on point. They are transcending to higher levels of their personal growth from the experience with me.
yeah,
And I am nothing but happy to see that. I'm like, yeah, that level up to me means that like I had impact in their life. So
yeah.
that was really, really cool to come to peace and come to terms with. I lost, but their journey continues, my journey continues, and all for the greater glory of self growth.
Yeah. What's meant for you will be, and what does not will fly away,
Yeah.
as they say. When people speak on your name 20 years from now, what is it that you hope they say?
I know they're gonna say Tyson was real. Tyson showed up. Tyson brought value. He created a value creation society around him. And Tyson was generous as a person, and he was a fighter. He fought for what's right. He advocated for what's right. He didn't just take what was given to him. He didn't just accept the social norm status quo of what we were presented. I know for a fact that will be brought up, and they'll know is like he was motivated. He was positive. He brought light into dark situations. And he really showed up in that way. And I know that's what will be brought up when I'm ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You know,
I'll say for me, if I was to say it in one word, it's a fighter. And a lot of times we take that as a macho, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But the more that I get to know real fighters, it has nothing to do with their alpha macho bullshit. It has to do with fighting for what's right.
Yeah.
And for me, you are a strong person who knows who they are. But even bigger than that is you put out a light to this world instead of taking that light and covering it up and keeping to yourself.
Yeah.
And you get much respect for me, for the man you are, for the father you are, for the husband you're about to be. And I'm forever grateful for our friendship.
I am too.
Yeah, I want to
I
thank
am
you for
too.
coming on. What I enjoyed most about this conversation really wasn't the hacks, the shortcuts, any of that stuff. It was the purity of building a life that lasts. And with that, it's light and love. It's not any of the other stuff. I appreciate you for coming on, for sharing your story, for being honest, for being vulnerable. And if you ever need anything from me, I'm always here for you, bud.
Gratitude. Much gratitude. Much
Thank you,
gratitude.
brother. I
Thanks for
appreciate you.
having me.
We'll see you soon.
I'm looking forward to this. All right.
Bye,